Someone once told me that Oak Creek, Colorado is 7 months of winter, 3 months of mud, and 2 months of the devil's frying pan. In April 2009, snow still layered those scrubby hills. Horse pens were muddy as hell, horses filthy, and hay spread as a carpet upon the ground. There was junk everywhere around the pens, old vehicles, water tanks, dead tractors without wheels, spars of iron. There were even goats running around. The herd's owner, Sandy Wisecup, had been married to a junk man, a collector and reseller of metals mostly, and 2 of her 3 sons were also in the same business. As a consequence, the horses were corralled amongst an enormity of junk. I had gone to Oak Creek to buy a horse. I'd been told there were paints and a couple bays available. The paints were in the filthy pens down below in a shallow canyon. "Where are the bays?" I'd asked. "They're up above," came the answer, as my host nodded toward the scrubby hill above us. Our 4-wheel drive would take us only halfway to where the hillside herd was kept. We would walk the rest of the way. My thought when first seeing the 2 bays, only one of which was for sale, was not that they were as scrubby as those hills. They did, after all, still wear their winter coats. No, my first thought was a quiet joy just being in their presence. Oh, if I'd known anything at all about horses, I would have probably just walked away. But I didn't, and there, for the first time, I saw the horse that would be mine. He was a stud without a harem. He looked a little beat up, most likely because he was a small boy, and not that able to defend himself from the other stallions who were protecting their mares. He was interested then only in eating. Sandy's son had managed to get a front loader with his bucket full of hay up the hill earlier. This small boy, this bay, was wasting no time at all filling his belly. He would continue that love affair with food for a very long time. Whenever any of us would try to put a hand on him, he'd back away a few inches. He didn't bolt or dance around with our advances. He just very calmly moved away. I observed to the little group who'd gone up the hill that he sure seemed shy. And then and there, once I'd said that word, shy, I knew I had just named my horse, Shy. Yes, sir, his name would be Shy. When I first saw my boy, Shy, if I'd had any doubts at all about whether or not I'd make him mine, those doubts evaporated when I gazed into his eyes. They were kindly, knowing eyes. Maybe they communicated a little of what my boy had been through those first 5 years of his life. Maybe those eyes touched my soul that day. I thought of Shy when I read some good words from Mark Sprague, who wrote Where Rivers Change Direction, in a chapter entitled In Praise of Horses. Sprague notes, I was a boy, and I believed deeply in the sightedness of horses. I believed that there was nothing that they did not witness. I believed that to have a horse between my legs, to extend my pulse and blood and energy to theirs, enhanced my vision, made of me a seer. I believed them to be the dappled, sorrel, roan, bay, black pupils in the eyes of God. Yes, and maybe upon that first gaze into Shy's eyes, I too had seen the eyes of God. I saw Shai first in April, and then again in May. Both times, Shai had been somewhat of a loner, while the other stallions were anxious and aggressive, prancing here and there, circling their harems of mares. Shai stayed apart, usually to himself. He seemed to be comfortable only with the closeness of an old, shaggy mare. Both of them would ease into the other's proximity and stand for a while together, resting their heads on the other's neck, closing their eyes as if they had found their mutual peaceful sanctuary. I don't know whatever happened to that aged mare. I suspect Shai, upon the beginning of his great adventure away from those scrubby hills, probably thought of her often and missed the comfort of her closeness. Shai had been foaled in May of 2004, sired by an Appaloosa named Saws Jinx. The dam had been a roan-colored quarter horse named Blondie. He'd been foaled down below in the shallow canyon where spring mud persisted till June. In the first 5 years of his life, Shai had never been vaccinated, wormed, or had his hooves trimmed. He'd never been shod. He'd never been gentled or actually handled by anyone at all, and he was still a stallion. Before he would be moved from the home, the land upon which he had been born, and where he'd spent the first 5 years of his life, he'd undergo the confusion, pain, and discomfort of receiving the attention of a vet for the first time in his life. Sadly, his hooves would not be trimmed for an additional 2 months. And if that had not been enough, Shai would be manhandled into a trailer not 2 days after he'd been gelded for a 50-mile trip to Craig, where a young woman would gentle him. Or so that was the expectation. Eventually, the young woman would find Shai to be a problem horse and not responsive to her methods. Those of us who know Shai, though, know differently than that young woman in Craig. The only problem throughout the first several months of his new great adventure was, I believe, that human beings had not yet proven themselves worthy of his trust. It would take the combined blood, sweat, and tears of Rachel Henley and me to bridge that space between horse and man, woman. I moved Shai to Denver at the end of August 2009. And here I'll leave this story of Shai for a while. What I've told you is both bitter and sweet. Bitter in the sense that my boy had been left up there on those barren hills and down below in the muck for so terribly long. He'd learned to live as wild horses surely do, for he himself was wild, against the freeze of winter, the hellish summers. If only I had known sooner. But then I didn't know about that little bay, half a state away, who'd managed to survive the particular fate that had been his for 5 years. There is also sweetness in what I've told you. Yes, someone had finally seen the essential worth of that diminutive horse, and with all my heart I believe he eventually came to know the worth of people who loved him unconditionally. So I leave this now with only the beauty of the horse I became, with only my deepest hope that he will live the rest of his life loved and valued for what he is, a little guy who captured hearts, who eventually gave as much love as he received. George Seaton.